Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., and on this special edition of Tell Me Your Story, where we are not only streaming live at those times, but also podcasting on SoundCloud and iTunes and TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, other locations you folks are that you're linking us to, I should say, and also on YouTube. You can watch these programs. You can watch the videos on YouTube. Just go to Richard Dugan, Tell Me Your Story, and just look for the fellow with the black hat. Appreciate the fact that you do that. And also, if you'd like, subscribe. We would greatly appreciate that. You know, we don't ask you to do too much on this program in that regard. We don't ask you to do homework or anything of that nature. But if you could subscribe, that would be wonderful. I know that as of this program, we are probably fast approaching 33,000 listens on the podcasts through SoundCloud. And now that's over a 3-year and 3 or 4 month period. And I don't know what that number really means. I mean, I'm grateful that people have listened that many times. But hey, you know, if it was 300 or 33,000, hey, we'll take it, because we're just trying to get the word out about what people have to say about their lives, sharing their particular story, and what it is that they're doing to make their world a better place than it was yesterday or today, and make it better tomorrow. And that doesn't mean that today is bad, by no means. It just means, as they say, there's always room for improvement. If you resonate with this program and it sounds like something you'd like to be a part of, we will also encourage you to support us financially through PayPal for your security as well as ours, and also participate in the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s. Who knows, in a few months, it could be entering the 21st century version of the roaring 20s, because hopefully soon all of the restrictions will be lifted. Most everybody will be vaccinated, and we will be out there partying like it was 1999. Of course, it'll only be 2021, but who cares? We'll be partying and enjoying the fact that we can get back together again. And that will be very exciting. So please take that time to go within, listen to that still small voice, and re-energize, rejuvenate, refortify yourself internally. The internal life of an individual is the one thing that drives the external world, if you will, or our external lives. So take that time if you would. Our special program today, our special edition of Tell Me Your Story, is going to focus on not only just a story of our guest, whose name is Darlene West, all the way in northern Idaho, where, as we're speaking, it's probably colder than a witch's. We won't say what that is, but we do know that it gets chilly up there, up near the Canadian border. As a matter of fact, interestingly enough, one of her parents was half French Canadian and the other Greek. And we're going to talk a little bit about that aspect of one's life and heritage and current living with Darlene West. Welcome to our program, author of Awaken by Grace.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for having me.
This is, I think, going to be a good program, because a lot of people are looking for that, as I mentioned earlier, going within and finding that peace, that calm. And you seem to have at least found a way to bring that into your life through the grace that you found. First of all, let's define some terms, as we like to do on this program. What
Sure.
is grace to you?
For me, is unmerited forgiveness and unmerited love, grace is what God is all about in my heart. Mm-hmm. That's where he forgives me. That's where he loves me. That's where he helps me. And that side of him is the most wonderful you know, when you're really down, that's when he's near you, and that's part of his grace. You can feel his presence around you. That's what I see grace as, is something that I've not earned, but I receive it anyways from him because of his great love for us.
Now, there is the grace of God, and I understand that, but there's also that grace with which we give to one another through our forgiveness, and we'll talk about that as well, the forgiveness part. But there's a third element that seems to be missing from our lives, and again, this is something that has to be done very humbly, okay, if you will, on bended knee, so to speak. We don't often give ourselves the very grace that we say is undeserved and unearned from God, in terms of, especially in the context of forgiveness. I went through a series of phases, and one of them was, it had to do with a particular individual. It could be a situation too. I forgive you, but more importantly, I forgive myself for allowing myself to blah, 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 blah. Let's talk, can we talk a little bit about that aspect of forgiveness and grace? And again, I say it once again, it has to be done from a very humble position. You don't do it from a position of pride or shall we say haughtiness.
Yes, I agree with you. Forgiving yourself, I find when I forgive myself is harder than for me to forgive others. I don't know why, but it just seems to be more difficult because I guess I'm really hard on myself. And I believe others feel the same way, because I've met other people and they didn't feel as though they were worthy of anything. You know, not, you know, why would I win a contest? Why would I be able to get that job? You know, because they don't feel worthy of their own selves. But I think it's more difficult to forgive yourself and to see yourself in the light that God could see you. I know it was always difficult for me, and then one day it clicked. He loves me. Why? Because he created me. And that's what helped me to get through this, you know, with forgiving myself. Because if God created me, it's because he loved me. Just like when I had my two children, I loved them. So, you know, I brought them into this world. So, you know, that's where I believe that God's looking at me now. And that's what gets me through to forgive myself and have grace on my own self.
You know, what I find interesting too, Darlene, is one of the studies that I did years and years ago when I was working for a Christian radio station back in Phoenix, Arizona, on the word perfection or being perfect. And of course, the New Testament, for a quote, if you will, is be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. And I wondered what that meant. And as I began to do some study, and of course, remembering, of course, different phrases and lines from the Old Testament, the Psalms in particular, and Proverbs and what have you, it finally struck me, and I'd love for you to share with us your perspective on this. Perfection didn't have anything to do with being good or doing anything, being right or wrong or what have you. According to phrases in the Old Testament, passages in the Old Testament, I am that I am. Well, God is neither good nor bad, right nor wrong, you know, good or evil. God just is. And it struck me, that's what it means to be perfect, just to be. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are, I would look at the word perfect in the English. I've, you know, grew up with an amalgamation of French and Greek in my English language. So there was words when I was little that I didn't know what they were in the English, but I could actually express them in the other languages. But, you know, and so when we see the translation, we need to look up what word was there in the Greek or what word was there in the Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I look at. And I think in my heart, when he says, be perfect as I am perfect, we can't be perfect. For by grace we are saved through faith, not of ourselves.
Sure.
It's the gift of God. but I think he's saying be holy because I'm holy. To try to live according to, follow after his examples. That's that simple. Just follow after his examples. We can't meet up to God's expectations. If we could, then we wouldn't need Jesus. So we need to, just follow his, examples. That old saying, what would Jesus do before you make a leap into something?
Yeah.
Especially somebody on the road cuts you off. What would Jesus do? Is he going to flip him off? No. Do I feel like it? Yes, but you don't. That's where I think that perfection comes in. It's trying.
Yeah. I also think about this from another perspective as well, in terms of our personal individual demeanor, shall we say. Come unto me as little children. And it's like, okay, it says as little children, childlike, not childish, but childlike. Not like the 2-year-old that they talk about the terrible twos. No. That's not what we're talking about. And there are moments in our adulthood, aren't there, Darlene, where we actually do feel that childlike, that feeling of I don't know, maybe not so much smallness as much as innocence and vulnerability. We still, even after all of the years that we have been around, I've been around 60 years now. Even then, I still have those moments here and there where it's like, I'm still in awe and in wonder of things.
Oh, yes. It's especially when I look up to the stars, and he said that he's got a name for every single star out there. I mean, that's wow. With me, the childlike faith is what I'm looking at, is expect. In other words, he's saying, expect from me. When you pray, expect from me. Don't just sit there and go, oh, well, after you pray and ask him for something, then you turn around and you say, well, let's see if he does it or not. It's like my grandchildren. If I said to them when they were, 5 years old, I'm taking you to Disney World tomorrow, they would be telling all their friends, I'm going to Disney World tomorrow. They would expect it. And so that's what God wants us to do, is expect it and praise him for it before we even see it come into manifestation.
Darlene West is my guest here on a special edition of Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. And we're talking about a lot of different things, but especially more specifically as we come back, talking about Awakened by Grace. Awakened by Grace is the title of her book. Her website is darlenewest.com. So we hope that you will go to her website and find out more about her and the work that she is doing as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan. And we're talking with Darlene West about Awakened by Grace. We've already talked about the concept of grace in what you have lived and experienced. What do you mean? How were you awakened by grace? And I guess that's going to dive right into your story.
Okay. I used to wonder, I was raised in religion rather than just Jesus is my Lord and my Savior. And I used to wonder why Jesus doesn't do this today. He doesn't heal today. He doesn't help people today. But when he walked the earth, why did he change? And then when I even went to my priest, because I was raised Roman Catholic and Greek Orthodox. And I went to my priest and I said, why doesn't Jesus do these things today? And he says that there are miracles, but not all the time. It was his answer, and I didn't like it. So I started searching and wondering what's going on here, but at the same time, I was very secular. I was young and having fun. I was in my early 20s and mid 20s. And then one day it hit me. I said, if the words, because everywhere I turned, somebody was saying, you got to be born again. And I said, well, if the words born again are in the Bible, I'll get born again. But I said that to myself. 2 weeks later, I met a stranger. And she told me to look at, she had her Bible and she handed it to me. She says, look at John 3:3. I looked at it and said, very, very, I say to you, one must be born again. Well, he woke me up. He showed me, I'm here. I'm hearing you. I love you. I'm listening. And that's how I got woken up by grace. So I heard him in my heart, not in my ears, but in my heart. I love you. And I knew then that he was real. That was the faith that I had, the childlike faith, like, you're there. I was all by myself when I said, if I see the words born again, I'll get saved, because I kept getting annoyed by these evangelists coming up to me. But then when it happened, it was wonderful.
You have an education from college that is rather interesting. And I always find this interesting when people have focused on English and the English language and those types of aspects of our ways of communicating, because we seem to have, and it's not exclusive to this particular period in our history as we are currently living it. This has been going on for decades. The English language keeps changing, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It grows, and we come up with new words and this type of thing. And yet at the same time, we seem to have, in spite of the number of words that we have in our vocabulary, we're still having a devil of a time communicating with one another, and understanding one another. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I find that, like with my own husband, him being a man and me being a woman, I see things, I communicate differently than he communicates. You're right. I see that it's hard for us to understand unless we actually sit down and listen. I think that's our biggest problem today, is listening to each other about what's in your heart and accepting it. Because a lot of people, they get on the, wow, you think that's what you believe, and they get on their high horses. And you got to listen. And you see, I guess English was very important to me because there were words in my language when I was growing up. On top of all this, with different, French words and Greek words, and that I didn't know them in English. On top of this, my parents had a very deep New York City accent. So, like for an example, we didn't say toilet in my house, we said turlet. And so I was embarrassed many times because of my language barrier. Mm-hmm. And I learned for communication, I guess, on my own, and then going through college. And they say, well, what is that author trying to say? Well, we don't know exactly what that author is saying, what he's trying to do. We can guess at it, but once you put it out there, it belongs to everybody else. And once you say something to somebody, it belongs to that person. And then they're going to communicate it in their own minds, mm-hmm. on what you meant, and not exactly what you may have meant. And so instead of I've learned, instead of jumping, it's, what did you mean by that? And that's what I've learned to do. My husband and I, we both learned to do that. So what do you mean by that? And then we got to explain it to each other. When you get to be grandparents and everything, and you get older, it gets to a point where it's not worth it anymore for the arguments. And you want to find out more what they're thinking than you do argue.
Yeah. Yeah, I have that same sense and awareness with, in particularly, my father. There's certain questions I'd love to ask him, but I don't, simply because what would be the point? I have an idea of what his answer would be, and it's not like I'm trying to put words in his mouth necessarily, but I know him fairly well that he'd rather not go there. So I don't. And we talk about other things so that at least we can have a conversation. And that's not to say by any means that there's any kind of a rift. We're certainly not estranged in any way, shape, or form. But at the same time, I think it's my sense of respect for him and his well-being. The man is 90 years old this year. And,
Wow.
The last thing he needs now is to be challenged on who he is and where he's at in his life. I am grateful that he's lived this long. I remember asking him 20 years ago on his birthday how it felt to be 70. And he says, well, two things. Number one, I didn't expect to live this long, but number two, I'm glad I'm here. So, it's one of those things that is really kind of, I mean, it's funny how I know he doesn't think anything of it, but I am very proud to say that my father is 90. I don't know why it is that he's 30 years older than I am. And there's just something about that I can say. And maybe it's partly because my father is still alive. And I know a lot of people whose parents, even at my age, whose parents have long gone.
Right.
Your parents in particular, your father was 100% Greek and your mother half Greek and half French Canadian. And I'm curious about the challenges that you faced as a child growing up between those two ethnicities, if you will, and then being raised in the United States and in New York in particular. I mean, you sort of alluded to that a little bit, but because I'm sure that your father had his particular ways that he knew of on how to raise children, on what was important to believe in a work ethic and how to live and so forth. And I'm sure your mother had the same kind of thing. Did you notice that there was sort of a collaboration and cooperation between your parents, as opposed to what we see, especially on television, where you've got the competitive aspects? Instead of a team, you've got two teams of each individual's kind of going at each other, trying to get one up on the other, trying to win a particular point.
Well, see, my father was working most of the time.
Okay.
And my mother, she didn't start working until we got older. So she was usually at the law in the house at the time. When my father was home, what he said it was it. When dad said something, that was it. You don't even argue with it. When mom said something, you can argue with it a little bit and try to get your way. But no, there was no competition. He worked. He was the working guy, and my mom was she was the homemaker.
Mm-hmm.
And she taught us things about, I was in the kitchen with her since I can remember. And she let me start cooking with her when I was 5. And she gave me all the dirty work, like mixing the meat for the grape leaves, to stuff the grape leaves and stuff. And but I enjoyed it. I had fun. Yeah. And help her roll grape leaves, help her roll cabbage leaves, and help her with the lamb and stuff, put the garlic inside the lamb in different places. And so, but my sister now, she can cook, but she don't like it. So she stayed out of the kitchen. And so, but she got the dirty job though. She was doing the dishes most of the time, but she did everything she could to avoid the kitchen. But when she wants to cook something now, she calls me up. She says, how did mom do this or how mom did that? But it was more of the old-fashioned way where the mom, took care of the kids and the father went out and worked. Mm-hmm. Because it was just that way. My father grew up in a home, actually, because after his mother passed away, his father put the 6 youngest kids into a home. Because back then, when she passed away, my grandmother, back then they didn't have childcare like they got today, you know. So you had to have one parent to be in that home. So he'd go see them. And also to his eldest brother was already working with his father when his mother passed away. So yeah, it was a different type of thing. It was more, you know, I started drinking wine when I was 4. It was the culture, the Greek culture was there more than anything than the French, because my grandfather was still a big influence on my family. So, and he's the one that poured us our first glasses of wine, my sister and I.
Well, I used to, back in the 80s, 1980s, I used to produce a program called the All New Greek Family Hour. And in Phoenix, we had, every year, they would have a Greek festival. And I loved going to the Greek festival. I have to tell you that the Greeks have some of the best food. Oh my!
Thank you.
Between baklava and gyros with the lamb and all of the other wonderful things. I've even had the fig or grape leaves stuffed with, you know, cabbage leaves stuffed with, and so forth. I mean, it's just wonderful. But also there's another aspect of it too, and that is, and again, this is probably under the more of the category of the religious side as opposed to the spiritual, and that is the ritual and the ceremony of the Greek Orthodox masses in the churches. I mean, I was born and raised Roman Catholic. When I married the first time, it was to a woman who was a member of the Byzantine Rite of the Catholic Church, which takes its heritage all the way back to Constantinople, which became Byzantium, which was Byzantium beforehand. And I've always loved that aspect of Catholicism, was the ritual and the traditions and the ceremony, the incense and the candles and all of the stained glass and the statuary and the icons and so forth. And I know there are folks who have problems with that because they think that we're worshiping them, and we're not worshiping them. If it's something that helps you to stay focused on your life's purpose and God and so forth, why not use it? You know, let it be there for you. So I've always had that, and I don't know about you, but there's just always been something about the old churches, not only the buildings, but again, the liturgies and so forth. How about you? What's your perspective on that? Do you still kind of hold to that aspect of faith, or have you sort of moved on to different forms and so forth that serve you better than, say, the Greek Orthodox or Catholicism?
Well, the Greek Orthodox, I have to admit, they had better communion than the Roman Catholics, because you get this lump of Greek bread. And so, and you got real wine too with it. But we went to Greek camp, my sister and I. It's Camp St. Sophia over there in Big Bear, up in Big Bear. In fact, we were the first class to go into that week, when they opened up for the first time. And I just, I got a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And I find that what I need more than anything else is to get up in the morning and praise the Lord for it. Praise the Lord that this is a day that he has made, and I shall rejoice and be glad in it. And I'd say that declaration every day when I open up my eyes, because I know that he, no matter what's going on out there, no matter how bad things look, especially like in our governments and the taxes and everything that's like the border right now, but I believe that God is still there, and I won't give up on him because he's never given up on me. And I think having a personal relationship with Jesus is more important to me than anything else. I love the old church services, and I've been to the Russian Orthodox Church too. And that was a beautiful ceremony. I only went once, but it was absolutely amazing. They don't even sit down. They just stand for the Lord, But I believe that, if you got Jesus in your heart, you're going to heaven, period.
Mm.
And he said so. And if after everything he's done for us, I don't care where you're going to worship him, what building or where you want to be when you're worshiping him. All he wants to do is know that you love him because he loves you.
Yeah.
But I need to talk to Jesus. That's my main. I need to talk to him. I need to have a conversation with him in the morning. I need to have a conversation with him at night when I'm going to sleep. He's with me, and when I get up, he's with me when I walk around. He's with me when I'm sleeping, and that's so comforting because I used to be so afraid of my own shadow.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that no more because
Mm.
I saw a lot of things.
Yeah.
In life growing up and in places where we lived. And I've had a gun pulled on me to get in the car, but I didn't. I just got up and walked away. And so, because I was so scared that my skin was going to fall off. And so, I've had, incidents where I was almost kidnapped. And being a girl, well, I grew up halfway back east and halfway in California, in LA. So, in some places, with Santa Monica, when we lived in Santa Monica at that time, it wasn't like today. It was pretty rough.
Mm.
And so I grew up in these cities, and I grew up, street smart, I would have to say, but God was always there. He was always there with me. I didn't have to go somewhere to find him. He was inside of me, walking with me. And that's the peace I've got.
Darlene West is my guest here on the program. Tell me your story, a special edition, New Paradigms for a New World. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com, as well as the podcasts on SoundCloud and Spotify and TuneIn Radio and other locations. And you can also watch these interviews on YouTube. Richard Dugan, tell me your story. Just look for the guy with the black hat. We're talking with Darlene West, and I thank you so much for staying with us here on the program, Darlene. Now, I mentioned that my father is 90 years of age this year, and I am too much of a gentleman to ask you your age, but I know that based upon your story and what you've shared, not only in your book, Awakened by Grace, which is available at your website, darlenewest.com, but also what you've shared with us thus far in all of the different environments that you have lived in, New York, and of course, California, you've been here, and you now live up in Idaho and so forth. And I want to ask you your observations of life as you have watched it unfold over the years. And what are some of the more, shall we call them, distinctive aspects? And I even want to put it in the context of miracles or supernatural events that you have personally experienced in your life and in your walk.
Well, I'll tell you about something that happened to me just recently. I had a cancerous cyst on my kidney, on my left kidney. Mm-hmm. Yes, my left kidney. And it started to grow a little bit. I was watched a lot by my doctors. And so they sent me to nephrology, who's a kidney specialist. And after all the prayer that we've had, people laid hands on me, we prayed. And I believe in the healing of Jesus Christ because he healed all when he was walking the earth. And he's the same today, yesterday, and forever. Well, it's gone. It just disappeared. I'm just praising the Lord. I've had miracles like that. Oh my gosh. God is just, when I met my husband, I wasn't going to go to this Christmas fellowship that somebody had invited me, and my kids, it was the day after Christmas. And my kids, they grabbed my hands and they never did this before because my husband adopted my two boys. And they grabbed my hands and they said, come on, let's go, Mom. I said, I don't want to go. Come on, let's go. When I met him and I was walking away from the party, I was getting into my car and all of a sudden love was just being poured in my heart from my husband. I love that I can't even explain. And I said, Lord, you're out of your mind. I said, I'm never going to see this man again because he lived in Maryland and I lived in Connecticut at the time. And he came out just then and he's talked to me and said goodbye to me. And then a couple of days later, he called me up from Maryland. But yeah, I've had different, divine appointments where God saved our lives. I mean, we were leaving a fair one time and in Oregon, Salem, Oregon State Fair. And this lady stopped us and she says, do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions? It's a survey. It won't take too much time. I said, sure. Well, that 10 minutes that she took with us saved our lives because 10 minutes ahead of us, a woman had lost her life in a car accident. A deer ran in front of her car and she went off the road. So yeah, I see God's hand on my life everywhere I go now. But those are just a couple of the situations. I haven't had a cold. I prayed, I said, Lord, I don't want these colds anymore. I used to get pneumonia every year for 3 months. And I said, I can't deal with this. You need to take this. And so I haven't had a cold in 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Darlene West is my guest here on Tell Me Your Story, a special edition. As we continue our conversation, go to her website, darlenewest.com, and we're talking about Awakened by Grace. Let me ask you about something I touched on at the front end of the program, and I'm finding more and more people are listening to that still small voice, their intuition, if you will. Whether it's some people will call it their higher self, some people will call it God, they'll call it the Holy Spirit, whatever. It's that internal guidance that's spoken of so much. And I'm curious about if I can put it in this context, your relationship with that still small voice. I refer to it as my friend. And
wow.
I've said many times that the still small voice will never put you in harm's way, might challenge you. I've been challenged of late to do things that seemed contrary to my human mind. But I followed through anyway. And then when I looked back, I'm going, and if I hadn't listened and followed the promptings, things would have been a lot worse. I would have put myself in harm's way by not listening. Tell us about your relationship and experiences with, we'll call it that still small voice.
I call it my gut feeling. You know how you have a gut feeling, well, I need to turn down this road instead of going straight like I normally do. If you don't, then you get in trouble. Yeah, I believe that the small still voice is what guides us through life, and it's the Holy Spirit. I've had, like one time this, I was going home and I felt this gut feeling I had to go to my friend's house. And I went to her house and she really needed me because her son was killed in a car crash. And I had no idea. But when I got there is when I found out. And her son was 20, she buried him on his 21st birthday, which was horrible. But she needed friendship there. She needed consoling. And even though her family was around her, I believe that God was leading me to help her. And everybody that was there to help her. But yes, I believe, I call it my gut feeling. I have a gut feeling like, with the crypto coin, my husband and I, we had this gut feeling, both got the same gut feeling about what people are laughing at is Dogecoin. And my son, my eldest son, he's standing on top of his head, said, "Why are you buying this? Why are you buying this?" I said, "We got a gut feeling." He said, "You don't invest that way. We'll see." And so, that's just, we let the gut feeling guide us and lead us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because our own minds, boy, phew.
Darlene West is my guest here on Tell Me Your Story, the special edition, darlenewest.com, the website, and Awakened by Grace is the book that she has written. How long did it take you to put this particular work together? When did this idea come to you? And I'm going to presume, if I may, that it was that gut feeling that told you it's time for me to write these things down.
Well, the name Franklin came in my mind first. And okay, Lord, what about Franklin? And as I street evangelized, I was able to evangelize one person at a time. And to this day, if I'm in a grocery store, God wants me to minister to somebody, I minister to them. And usually somebody that really needs my help about something. And so, but with the novel, as an adult educator, storytelling is one of the techniques. In fact, it's one of the best techniques you can use to teach adults and children, both. You can hear a story and then think, wow, that reminds me of me. I've done that. And then sometimes your answers come out of that, and sometimes they don't. But God showed me that I can reach thousands of people with a novel, not just one-on-one. I could just reach one person at a time. And so it took me 3 years to write it, but it took me about 5 years to actually sit down and do it, because the name Franklin kept coming in my heart. And finally God said, "Write." So I sat down and I started writing. And before I knew it, the words would just pour out of me. I'm like, wow, I was surprised myself. I would even cry over scenes. I would laugh over scenes, and I'm like, wow, this is like, I didn't even know what's going on in this book, until I read it. That's what it was like. But I mean, I knew what was going on, but it was, I don't like that, because I knew I was being directed with that small, still voice.
Yeah. It seems that a lot of folks are, as I mentioned earlier, starting to, and maybe it's because of, not so much in spite of, but because of what we've gone through in this past year, of the lockdowns and the isolation and so forth, that the only one you have left to deal with is you. Do you find that when you talk with people, and maybe you share this aspect of the still small voice and going within and maybe meditating and praying and that kind of thing, they're more receptive these days than they used to be, because it's kind of what we've been we've been left, in a manner of speaking, to our own devices, and and that we really need to get to know who we are from the inside.
Wow, I like the way you put that. I think being left to our own devices has gotten us to a point where I believe that there's an awakening coming on, where we're waking up and, like awakened by grace, grace is waking us all up and saying, hey, look at what's going on around you. Yeah. As Americans, we become very complacent, and this is our lives. That's my job. This is my family. And this is what I'm going to take care of. And, you're going back and forth, but you're not really paying attention on the rest of the place. And I see a lot more people are paying attention now. And I don't know if you ever heard of Mario Murillo.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. And he's doing a big tent meeting in Modesto soon. I don't know exactly when it's supposed to be, but we love Mario. And Hank, gosh, how do you say his last name? Kuhneman. Did you ever hear of him? Yeah.
No, name doesn't ring a bell, but go ahead.
But God is using these men in mighty ways and bringing in, especially Mario. I mean, he's having miracles. People coming into his tent meetings and they're crying out for the Lord. He said that some people are just starting to moan because he has to stop preaching and lead them to Christ and help them. And because people are being awoken up, I believe. I think that, yes, they have been left to their own devices. And the one thing I never could understand is the church itself, the Christian church. I don't care which, if you go to the Catholic Church, you go to Assembly of God, wherever you go, the Baptist Church, they all seem that they wouldn't, they're not they're not a family like we're supposed to be, like Christ intended us to be, one family in Christ Jesus. And I see the coming together of the churches now more so than ever before. I believe that God is doing something big in our nation now, even though it looks so, gosh, I don't even pay attention to what the darkness is doing.
Yeah.
Just pay attention to what God is doing.
There you go. Stay focused on the light.
Yes, absolutely.
We are talking with Darlene West. She's the author of her latest work, Awakened by Grace. Is this your first novel, your first writing?
It's not my first writing, but it's my first novel.
So what else have you written?
Oh, well, I got a poem that was published and called The Heart. And I have also a short story that's nonfiction. And I like to play with words when I'm writing. My nonfiction story that got published by Oregon State University, and that's called Civilian Mom. And I like to play with words. That one is all in present tense. And so like with Awakened by Grace is third person, but it's through the eyes of Franklin. He's the man and I'm a woman, and I wanted to see if I can, like, what's her name? Wharton, Age of Innocence. You ever hear that novel?
I believe I have, yeah.
Yeah, she wrote it all. Yeah, she wrote it all in third person through the eyes of a man, and I wanted to see if I could do it that way too. But Franklin was God's creation, I believe. Because the way it came out of me, and I believe that God gives us gifts, and that's one of my gifts is to write and cook.
Yeah.
My husband will, testify that I'm a good cook. So he says that's where your gift is. And I'm known as the fudge lady here in my neck of the woods here. And I'm not known as, or Granny's goodies, cookies, fudge, cake, but I want to be known as the author. I want people to actually enjoy my stories and to feel Christ's love. I could have written a romance. You know how you lose somebody in a story, then they bring somebody else into their lives.
Yeah.
I wanted Christ to get the credit. I didn't want somebody else to get the credit.
Yeah.
And that's, I had to leave him alone with Christ at one scene, and so that he would get the credit. It's grace that wakes us up.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about loss if we can. And the fact is that, we have lost, as of our conversation, probably in this country alone, due to the pandemic, we've lost over probably close to 550,000 human beings. I don't even like to focus on the number because it so dehumanizes them. These were mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and husbands and wives that aren't around anymore. And there's a certain element of, this didn't have to happen this way. It really didn't, but it did. And so we need to figure out how to cope with that. But when we lose people in our lives, and I know one day my father, I'll get the phone call from Arizona. I don't know how I'll react. I have a great deal of respect for both of my parents. They're more like friends than they are parents nowadays, which is great. But from your perspective, you and I both have lived a number of years here, and we've experienced the loss of some family members and some friends and acquaintances and so forth. And I'm wondering how you view this, and I'm going to call it, we'll call it a passage in life. Certainly it is considered to be the last passage in this life, but there seems to be so much fear around it, and I'm wondering what your perspective is.
Well, I lost my aunt over the COVID. She was in New York City and in a nursing home, and COVID patients were put into her nursing home. She was in Suffolk County, and she was 88. I was talking to her about moving in with my husband and I so I could take care of her, because her 2 children died before she did. And so she had nobody else, 2 grandchildren, but I guess she kept telling me they're too busy to come see me too much, but they loved her very much. Don't get me wrong. They just had busy lives. And so the next thing I knew, Good Friday last year, she was gone. And she had told me she was in the hospital. And I asked, sorry. I thought that, I've had my first son, I lost my first son, and I've lost both my parents now. So yeah, I've had friends that passed away, and sometimes I look at myself and 2 of my best friends are gone from when I was young, and I'm still here. God's not done with me, and I'm praising the Lord for that. But it's just weird because everybody around me is gone. She was my last aunt after 12 aunts and uncles total. I'm talking about the blood aunts and uncles. My other uncle, my father's brother, passed away. He was 101 2 years ago. And him and his wife were married for 72 years. So 2 weeks later, she died. And she couldn't live without him.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of loss around me. And the hardest one of all is losing your child. That's the hardest to do. And you can't replace your child. You can't replace your loved ones at all. But my father would have been 101 this year. And my mother, she wasn't supposed to die at that moment, and she just passed away. She went into surgery for her ankle, and they thought she did great. And when she came out, she was fine. The next morning, she was gone. So yeah, loss is hard. I mean, I hang on to this. I know I'm going to see them again. I know when I go to heaven, they're there waiting for me. And they're so happy now. They're out of pain. They're out of any kind of suffering. And I'll tell you, they don't have to put up with this stuff anymore, that's going on in this earth. But it's a very dangerous world. I see it as, the older I get, the more I can see it. Before I was too close to the forest to see the trees, and I could see it. I mean, you can't drive to the store without wondering if you're going to get shot when you go into the store, and that's scary. And but you got to walk in faith and not by sight, because if you walk in faith, and then God will talk to that little voice inside you, say, hey, don't go in there today.
Yeah.
And you have to listen to it and heed to it. Well, why didn't I listen to it? Because, we're left to our own devices too. It's free will.
Yeah. And again, I realize this is more of a platitude than anything else, but the reality is that they aren't really gone. I mean,
Mhm.
even from the Christian philosophy, we are immortal, not the physical body, but the spirit, that essence that animates the body that you inhabit and that I inhabit is immortal. It has lived from the beginning of time, if you will, and it will go on. Does that give you, and do you, and is that something that you share with people in that respect? I mean, is that really something that helps when someone loses someone, or is that again, is it just words? Is it a platitude?
I think it depends on what you believe.
Yeah,
This man told me once. He says we're like dogs. They throw us in the grave and we're done. Well, anything he lost, he's going to think he'll never see it again, and they're just throwing them in the grave, and he's done seeing them. So, I believe that they're there. And I believe that our loved ones are the great cloud of witnesses that come before us and are praying for us, even. I believe that I know my parents are there together. I know my son is there. In fact, I keep telling my husband the first person I'm going to see is Simon when I go to heaven.
mm,
And I know he's going to be waiting for me.
yeah,
That gives me peace. Whereas if you don't have that type of, if you believe that, that your soul isn't immortal, your spirit is, people have a problem separating the body flesh and the body spirit,
yeah.
you know, and if they don't, you know, I think they suffer more when they lose somebody they love.
This is Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan. We're talking with Darlene West. Her book is a book that you can see right now in my hands. I've got my copy of Awakened by Grace. DarleneWest.com is the website, and we encourage you to go to her website to find out more about her and the work that she has been doing for a number of years. We aren't asking how many. That is not an appropriate question for this program. But what we do have are three final questions for you, Darlene, and I ask these questions of all of my guests. You may have addressed them throughout the interview, but I'd like to ask them directly just the same. But before I do that, I want to remind our listeners that this program is heard Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com, as well as this special edition of Tell Me Your Story. The podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, and other locations that you folks are reposting to. And we also encourage you to support us financially if you can with any amount. That's why we have a PayPal account for your security as well as ours. And we ask you to participate in the decade of perfect vision. The 2020s may become the roaring 20s here soon, when we are all allowed to go out and cavort and what have you with one another in a very friendly and happy family way, because it's been a long time since we've been able to hug our friends and loved ones. And so hopefully we'll be able to do that. But in the meantime, listen, take the time to go within, to listen to that still small voice, to allow that still small voice to give you the encouragement and the inspiration and the education, if you will, as well as finding that still, quiet, peaceful, calm space where you can rejuvenate and re-energize and refocus your awareness and your attention on those things that you need to be about doing in your life. So we hope that you will do that. My last three questions for you on this program, and I thank you again so much for giving us so much time on this program. The first of these three questions are, number one, who is Darlene West?
Me. I I've heard that question so many times, and I think, oh, please don't ask me that. I'm actually, I'm a wife, a mother, a granny. I am a granny. I'm the granny. The other grandparents are the grandparents. I'm the granny. And I'm a writer. I love my family. I love my God. And I love my country. I guess I got it. I'm known as having a big mouth, so go use it, Darlene. And so people look to me to go and say something. And I go, okay, I'll say it. But now I'm learning not to, because other people got to come out of their shells and say it themselves. But you won't guess what I'm thinking, because I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking. And I believe in that honesty really helps relationships much better, even if we don't like what we hear.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I would say that's who I am.
Okay.
I'm in love with Jesus.
All right. Number 2, what is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you are doing now?
That people could see Christ's love and how much he loves them, and not to give up on Christ, because Christ never will give up on you. He promises he'll never fail us or forsake us. And I'm hoping that it can help mend people's broken hearts too. People who are walking around with a heartache, there's nothing worse than a heartache. And how you can overcome is through Christ. I think the worst pain in the world is a heartache. And emotional pain, you can't, physical pain, you can get numb from it from a doctor.
Yeah.
But emotional pain, that's really hard. And I want people to see life in a more positive way, rather than, like Maggie, that childlike faith. Expect from Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Expect that he's going to do something good for you today. Yeah. And he will.
And finally, what is your life's purpose?
Am I trying to figure that out still? Maybe. My life's purpose is to be that mother, wife, grandmother, and I'm hoping to see my great grandchildren. My grandson wants me to be around his children. Mm-hmm. And I want to shine Christ to other people. I want people to see how much God actually loves them, and how much God is love, and how no matter how bad things look, God he's there for us. Mm-hmm. And we just got to hang on to his hem, and he will take us. He carries us. And I think my purpose in life is to help others more than anything. I've been doing that all my life, is helping others. And by the way, I'm not ashamed. I am 68 years old. I just turned 68 March 18th. And I love being 68, because life is so different now. When I look through my eyeballs now, things that were so dramatic and important when I was younger, they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
It's important. It's enriching my life more with my family, my husband and I. We like our quiet evenings together, walk, sit by the water, hold hands quietly. Those are the moments that I cherish now more than anything, because all the other drama is gone.
Yeah. Well, again, I thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and your book, Awakened by Grace. Darlene West has been my guest, and darlenewest.com is the website. We will be linked to your website, Darlene, so that people can find out more about you and the work you're doing, and maybe even get a copy of your book, Awakened by Grace. And again, I thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
And I thank you for listening and watching. Tell me your story, New Paradigms for a New World, as we've been giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to lol.